Family, friends and fans have paid tribute to legendary Hollywood actor Tony Curtis, who's died in his Las Vegas home.
In 1955, Tony Curtis came home and found a letter that changed everything. It was from another man to his wife, Janet Leigh. That night, their screaming fight was so loud the neighbors heard it. Tony never trusted her again. While Janet denied the affair, Tony started sleeping with other women behind her back, including a 17-year-old girl. By the time they divorced, Hollywood's perfect couple was hiding shocking secrets, phone-tapping private investigators, and a jealous rage that destroyed their family forever. Here's the bombshell story they tried to hide for 60 years. Janet Leigh was born Jeanette Helen Morrison on July 6, 1927, in Merced, California. She grew up during the Great Depression, the only child in a family that struggled to make ends meet. Her father worked in factories and picked up odd jobs to keep them going. They moved to Stockton not long after she was born, and that's where Janet spent most of her early years. Even though her family didn't have much, Janet stood out. She was a quiet, shy girl, but incredibly smart. She skipped grades in school and graduated high school when she was just 16. She loved getting lost in movies, often escaping into the dark of the theater while her family dealt with real-world problems. In 1946, something happened that changed her life forever. Janet was studying music and psychology at the College of the Pacific, and her parents were working at a ski resort in the Sierra Nevada to help pay the bills. One day, a woman named Norma Shearer, once one of Hollywood's biggest stars, saw a photo of Janet hanging in the resort lobby. It was a simple Christmas picture her dad had taken, but Shearer couldn't look away. She took the photo back to Hollywood and showed it to MGM's top talent agent. Just like that, the doors to stardom flew open. Janet had never acted before. Still, MGM gave her a screen test, and soon she had a contract with one of the biggest studios in the world. She left college, started acting lessons, and not long after, she was on the radio for the first time. Her first film came in 1947. Everything had happened so fast. It felt like a dream. But long before the fame, Janet's personal life was already complicated. When she was just 14, she got married to an 18-year-old named John Kenneth Carroll. It only lasted 5 months. A few years later, while still in college, she married a Navy man named Stanley Rees. That marriage didn't last either. Both relationships were over before she turned 21. It wasn't until 1951 that she found love in a way the public could see when she married actor Tony Curtis. They had 2 daughters together, including future actress Jamie Lee Curtis. But even that high-profile marriage ended in divorce. What people didn't always know about Janet was how hard she worked before Hollywood came calling. College wasn't easy. She was 16 when she started juggling school with jobs to help her parents. During school breaks, she worked long hours in department stores. Even during the semester, she worked the information desk on campus. Somehow, she still found time to sing in the college choir, join a sorority, and take part in student government. She was talented in so many ways, smart, musical, hardworking, but she rarely got credit for that once she became a movie star. Her time in college didn't last long, but it shaped who she became. It gave her discipline, strength, and a sense of responsibility, qualities that would help her survive in a tough industry and leave a lasting mark in Hollywood. Janet Leigh's journey into Hollywood felt like something straight out of a movie. It all started in 1946 when actress Norma Shearer spotted a photo of 19-year-old Janet at a ski resort where her father worked. Struck by her beauty, Shearer passed the photo to an agent. Just like that, Janet was on her way to becoming a movie star. She had never acted before, but MGM signed her anyway. Her first movie came in 1947, The Romance of Rosie Ridge, opposite Van Johnson. But even before filming finished, the studio kept changing her name. First it was Jeanette Reams, then Janet Leigh, then back to her real name, Jeanette Morrison. In the end, Van Johnson said he liked Janet Leigh best, so that's the one that stuck. Even though she left college for her acting career, Janet wasn't ready to give up on school entirely. She enrolled in night classes at USC, juggling books and film sets at the same time. One minute she was a small-town girl, the next she was a contract star at MGM. That was Hollywood in the 1940s. Fast, flashy, and full of surprises. By the end of 1948, Janet was already being called Hollywood's top glamour girl. That was just 1 year after her debut. In 1949, she landed some major roles: Meg March in Little Women, and then Holiday Affair with Robert Mitchum. She jumped between genres easily. One moment, she played a nun in a serious Cold War drama. The next, she was in a feel-good baseball movie, like Angels in the Outfield. She looked every bit the glamorous star, but off-screen she was known for being grounded and genuine. In just 4 years, she had already been in over a dozen films. And while the studio marketed her as a beauty, critics started noticing her talent too, especially in films like Act of Violence, where her dramatic chops stood out. Around this time, between 1951 and 1954, Janet explored something a bit different. She and her husband, Tony Curtis, began making informal home movies with their friend Jerry Lewis. These weren't for the public, just private, playful experiments with comedy. Away from studio pressure, Janet got to try out timing, improvisation, and different characters. It was a creative outlet that let her grow in ways she couldn't on set. Later on, she credited those homemade sessions with helping her understand comedy better, something that showed in her later films with Lewis, like Living It Up and Three on a Couch. Jerry was more than a collaborator, too. He even witnessed Janet and Tony's wedding. But not everything in her early career was joyful. During the filming of Jet Pilot, she had a disturbing and drawn-out experience with Howard Hughes. The movie started shooting in 1949 with John Wayne. But behind the scenes, Hughes became obsessed with Janet. He started stalking her, wiretapping her phone, and even hired private investigators to follow her around. One time, he tricked her into thinking she was going sailing with a friend. Instead, Hughes showed up, flew her to Grand Canyon himself, then took her to dinner in Las Vegas. She lived with her parents and was dating Arthur Lowe Jr. at the time. But that didn't stop Hughes. He once confronted her with a report he had compiled from spying on her, mistaking Arthur's sister for a secret boyfriend. The production dragged on for years, with Hughes constantly demanding reshoots. Though filming ended in 1953, he didn't release the movie until 1957, 8 years after it all began. Eventually, Janet had enough. When Hughes tried to interfere with her next project, she lost her temper, threw a phone at him, and scared him so badly that he hid behind his desk when her father showed up ready to defend his daughter. Meanwhile, Tony Curtis was born as Bernard Schwartz in the Bronx in 1925. His family was poor, so poor that sometimes they had to sneak out of their apartment in the middle of the night because they couldn't pay rent. His parents were Hungarian Jewish immigrants, and life was hard from the start. When he was 10, he and his younger brother were sent to an orphanage. Their parents just couldn't afford to feed them anymore. His mother had serious mental health issues. She was later diagnosed with schizophrenia, and Curtis said she used to beat him as a child. Then came the worst blow. His little brother Julius was hit by a truck and killed. That loss stayed with him for life. Growing up, he wore long braids as part of his Orthodox Jewish upbringing, and he got bullied for it. He had to get tough fast. The streets taught him how to survive. During World War II, he joined the Navy and saw the Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay. After the war, he used the GI Bill to study acting in New York. He trained with future stars like Walter Matthau and Harry Belafonte. He was still rough around the edges, but he had something, a kind of spark. In 1948, a talent agent spotted him. She said he stood out because he was the best-looking guy in the room. That was his ticket to Hollywood. He arrived at age 23 with no money but big dreams. The studio didn't like his real name. It sounded too ethnic. They said first they tried Jimmy Curtis, then Anthony Curtis, and finally landed on Tony Curtis. He liked it, said it sounded elegant, but it was also the start of erasing where he came from. They didn't stop with the name. The studio taught him how to ride horses, fence, and speak with polish. He was being reshaped into a movie star, far from a Bronx kid who spoke only Hungarian as a child. Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh didn't just fall in love. They crashed into it like a scene out of a movie. When they met in 1950 at a publicity event, sparks flew instantly. Debbie Reynolds, who saw it happen, said it was like fireworks exploding in broad daylight. Tony was a handsome, tough guy with striking blue eyes and a huge ego. Janet was already a star, glamorous and untouchable. But when Tony saw her, nothing else mattered. He wanted her, and that was that. The romance moved fast, and not everyone was thrilled. Tony's studio, Universal International, panicked when he said he wanted to marry her. They spent 3 days trying to stop him. They even offered him $30,000 to marry another actress, Piper Laurie, just for publicity. Tony turned them down flat. He called Piper a very unpleasant person and refused to play along. On June 4th, 1951, Tony and Janet eloped to Greenwich, Connecticut. Jerry Lewis stood by their side as witness. It was a bold move. Tony was risking everything, his career, his future, and he knew it. Janet, twice divorced and more famous at the time, had a lot more power in the relationship. Tony was still climbing, still trying to prove himself, but he didn't care. He was all in. Their love wasn't just fast. It was intense. Tony was jealous, insecure, and totally consumed by her. He once called her pretending to be Cary Grant just to see if she'd say yes to someone more famous. She didn't. Still, Tony couldn't relax. He waited outside her house when she went on dates with other men. He felt like he had to fight for her, even after they were together. There was another problem. Howard Hughes, the billionaire producer, had become obsessed with Janet. He sent her gifts, hired detectives to follow her, and even tapped her phone. Tony worried Hughes could ruin him, or worse. In his memoir, Tony said he feared Hughes might actually have him killed. Despite all that, they stayed together. And against all odds, their marriage didn't end their careers. It supercharged them. Tony later said, no couple matched their fame until Burton and Taylor came along a decade later. And they did it with scandal. Tony and Janet did it with talent and charm. By the late 50s, they were Hollywood royalty. They had 2 daughters, Kelly and Jamie Lee, and the world loved them. At the 1958 Golden Globes, Tony was named World Film Favorite. Janet handed him the award on stage. It was a perfect Hollywood moment. Their connection wasn't just personal. It was professional, too. They made 5 films together, starting with Houdini in 1953. That one was a big deal. Tony got his first leading role. And even though Janet was a bigger star, she signed on to support him, to prepare. Tony trained for a month with a magician to pull off the tricks. Janet said they learned the illusions themselves, so the movie wouldn't need special effects. Still, she admitted Tony wasn't exactly Houdini when it came to escaping locks. The film was a hit and gave Tony's career a major boost. Over the next few years, they co-starred in The Black Shield of Falworth, The Vikings, The Perfect Furlough, and Who Was That Lady? Their chemistry on screen matched their real-life love story, intense, passionate, and unforgettable. In 1960, Janet Leigh became a part of movie history. She starred in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, and her shower scene in that film still haunts people to this day. It was just 3 minutes long, but it took 7 full days to shoot. Hitchcock was obsessed with every little detail. The blood wasn't real. It was actually chocolate syrup because it looked better in black and white. To keep the shock a surprise, the trailer even used a different actress screaming in the shower. He thought of everything. That scene didn't just scare audiences. It scared Janet Leigh, too. After filming, she said she stopped taking showers. Even decades later, she kept her bathroom door and shower curtain open whenever she had to take one. The fear never left her. Still, the role changed her life. She won a Golden Globe and was nominated for an Oscar. More than that, she became known as the original Scream Queen. But her character wasn't just another helpless victim. Leigh gave her depth and strength, and that made a big difference in how women were seen in horror films. Years later, she admitted that while the experience had a lasting impact, she felt lucky. If an actor is remembered for one role, they're lucky, she said. And that scream, her scream, became iconic. While Janet was making history in horror, Tony Curtis was going through his own transformation. Early in his career, he was seen mostly as a handsome face. He starred in light adventure films and played charming roles, but critics didn't take him seriously. That changed with Sweet Smell of Success in 1957. He played a ruthless press agent, nothing like the roles he'd done before. Audiences weren't ready for it, and the film didn't do well at first, but over time people realized it was a masterpiece. It showed a new side of Curtis, a darker, more intense one. The very next year, he took on an even tougher role in The Defiant Ones. He played a prisoner chained to another man, played by Sidney Poitier. One was white, one was black, and the film forced them to face their differences. It was raw, powerful, and way ahead of its time. Both actors were nominated for Oscars, the first time two leads from the same film were up for Best Actor. Curtis's image as just a pretty face was officially over. He'd prove himself. But it was Some Like It Hot in 1959 that turned Curtis into a true Hollywood legend. In that film, he didn't just play one character. He played three. He was Joe, a musician on the run. He was Josephine, a woman in disguise. And he was Junior, a rich guy pretending to be something he's not. For that last role, Curtis came up with an idea on the spot. He would do it in a Cary Grant voice. The director loved it and told him to go for it. The film was full of wild moments, both on screen and off. During costume fittings, someone joked that Curtis had a better backside than Marilyn Monroe. Monroe fired back by flashing her chest and saying, "He doesn't have these." The film pushed boundaries, especially for time. It played with gender roles, identity, and sexuality in a way that had never been done before. Some worried it would be banned, but it became a huge hit. It won 3 Golden Globes and was later named the funniest American comedy ever made. Today, critics around the world still call it one of the best comedies of all time. In the summer of 1956, Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh had their first child, a baby girl named Kelly. To the outside world, they looked like Hollywood royalty. Both of them were at the top of their careers. Janet was landing major roles, and Tony was becoming a star. They smiled for cameras, posed for magazines, and seemed like the perfect couple. But behind the scenes, things weren't so perfect. One day in 1955, Tony came home between film shoots and found a letter. He believed it was from Bob Fosse, the choreographer working with Janet at the time. To Tony, it sounded like a love letter. Whether it really was or not didn't matter. His trust was shattered. Tony had always felt a little insecure. He came from a rough background. Janet was more refined, more polished. The letter pushed him over the edge. They argued loudly in their Beverly Hills home. Neighbors even heard it. Janet denied anything happened with FSY. But the damage was done. After that, something broke between them. It never fully healed, even though they had 2 daughters, Kelly and Jamie. Years later, Tony would admit that this was the moment their marriage started to die. Not long after, Tony gave in to temptation. He said he was 30, in his prime, and women were everywhere, beautiful, glamorous, eager. So he started saying yes. In 1955, he began seeing actress Gloria DeHaven. She had once performed for Navy troops during World War II, back when Tony was just a young sailor. Now he was a movie star, and they were sleeping together. It felt like a full-circle moment for him. From 1956 to 1958, Tony's affairs piled up. He was often seen at Hugh Hefner's Playboy Mansion parties. In 1958, he had a brief but intense relationship with Natalie Wood. She got pregnant. The pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. Decades later, Tony still spoke of Gloria DeHaven as the love of his life, even while married to his 6th wife. But while Tony was cheating freely, he couldn't stand the idea of Janet doing the same. He became paranoid, jealous, and obsessive. He would call Janet's hotel room over and over when she was on set. Sometimes he called more than 12 times in one night. He was especially fixated on Frank Sinatra. He was convinced Janet was sleeping with him, even though there was no proof. He hired a private investigator to follow her during the filming of The Manchurian Candidate, a movie that starred Sinatra. The investigator found nothing. Tony didn't care. He still believed what he wanted to believe. Their daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, later said that her father's jealousy poisoned everything. He accused her of having affairs with everyone, co-stars, delivery men, all while he was cheating. She said, "Like any save-a-marriage baby, I failed." By the early 1960s, things hit rock bottom. In late 1961, Tony was filming Taras Bulba in Argentina. His co-star was Christine Kaufman, just 17 years old. Tony was 36. He fell for her fast. When Janet visited the set unexpectedly, she saw their chemistry with her own eyes. She became sick on the spot. Because of Christine's age, the production team tried to keep their relationship secret. It would have been illegal in many places. But after filming ended in early 1962, Tony moved in with Christine, first in Europe, then in Los Angeles. They waited until her 18th birthday to live together openly in the U.S. Tony and Janet divorced in September 19, 1962. The day after her divorce from Tony Curtis was finalized, Janet Leigh married a man named Robert Brandt. It was September 15, 1962. The timing raised eyebrows, but Janet wasn't looking for drama. She was looking for peace. Robert was a stockbroker, not a movie star. He didn't care about the spotlight. Their marriage lasted over 4 decades until Janet died in 2004. Unlike her first marriage, this one was quiet and steady. They lived privately away from the cameras. On Christmas Day in 1982, 20 years into their life together, a star was named after both of them. It was a small, poetic moment that captured how strong their bond had become. Her daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, once said Robert raised her and taught her to love nature. He stayed in their Beverly Hills home after Janet died, until his own death in 2009. He never tried to take the spotlight, just held on to the life they built. Tony Curtis went in the opposite direction. Months after the divorce, he married his teenage co-star from Terra's Bulba, Christine Kaufman. He was 38. She was 18. He said his marriage to Janet had been over long before the papers were signed. He had 2 daughters with Christine, but the marriage didn't last. By 1968, it was over, another casualty of infidelity and drug use. The years that followed looked like a revolving door. He married again and again, Leslie Allen, Andrea Savio, Lisa Deutsch. Each relationship brought new children, new chaos. His son, Nicholas, died of a heroin overdose at 23. His last marriage in 1998 was to a woman 45 years younger than him. When asked about the age gap, he joked that he wouldn't be caught dead, marrying a woman old enough to be his wife. But the jokes didn't hide the damage. The divorce from Janet didn't just break up a family. It wrecked his career. Hollywood turned cold. Movie magazines ran headlines about him dating a teenager while his kids cried. Old friends like Robert Wagner called him out. Studios stopped calling. By the late 1960s, his only big role was in The Boston Strangler. After that, it was mostly smaller films and TV appearances. He kept working, but he was never a major star again. The public only saw the glamour, but behind it was a mess. Tony admitted that losing Janet broke his heart. He said he loved her, but she stopped seeing him the same way. He became jealous, accusing her of cheating, even with his friend Frank Sinatra. Meanwhile, he had his own affairs, including with Natalie Wood, and maybe even Marilyn Monroe. The damage didn't stop with them. Their kids felt it too. Jamie Lee Curtis later said she struggled with love because of what she saw growing up. She was born in the middle of the chaos, a save-the-marriage baby, as she put it. She said her parents hated each other, no matter how perfect they looked in magazines. After her parents split up, things got messy, especially with her dad. Still, Jamie found her own way. In 1978, she landed the lead role in Halloween, a horror film that became a huge hit. The casting wasn't just about talent. It was also a nod to her mother, Janet Leigh, who had famously screamed her way through Psycho years earlier. That connection between the 2 movies helped build Jamie's reputation as a new kind of scream queen. Not long after, Jamie and her mom shared the screen in The Fog. It was the first time they acted together. They did it again almost 2 decades later in Halloween H20. That film even included a little tribute to Psycho, with Janet driving a car that looked just like the one from her classic scene. The soundtrack even borrowed music from the original movie. Despite a rough childhood and complicated family ties, Jamie stayed grounded. In interviews, she said horror films opened every door for her. And in 2023, she won an Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once, proving that she wasn't just following her parents' footsteps. She was building something new. While Jamie found her path, her father, Tony Curtis, struggled to stay close to his daughters. After leaving Janet in the middle of a movie shoot, Tony pretty much disappeared from their lives. He later admitted he couldn't handle being around anyone, even his own kids. He blamed pain, addiction, and a messy personal life. Tony believed Janet had turned Jamie against him, saying she made him out to be a selfish, unreliable mess. Janet denied that, but the damage had already been done. Even when one of his daughters, Kelly, tried living with him, the relationship didn't last. As he got older, Tony began to feel the weight of everything he'd done wrong. Just 2 years before his death in 2010, he said he wanted peace, but only if his daughters could let go of the past. Then came the final blow. Just months before he died, Tony changed his will. He made it very clear none of his 5 children would get anything. Everything went to his 5th wife, Jill, who was 45 years younger than him. Jamie had just given a touching speech at his funeral, comforting others. But soon after, her sister Kelly filed a lawsuit saying Tony had been pressured into changing his will. Another sister, Algra, said Jill sold off their father's things without even offering them keepsakes. Jamie stayed quiet. She never spoke publicly about the will or the lawsuit. The case didn't go anywhere, and Jill kept everything. Looking back, Tony and Janet handled their breakup in completely different ways. Janet stayed private. She moved on quickly, marrying a stockbroker and settling into a quieter life. She even stepped away from the spotlight to give her kids some stability. Tony, on the other hand, couldn't stop talking. He criticized Janet in interviews and in his book, saying she was bossy and that their marriage had been more about boosting his career than love. He married again and again, but never seemed at peace. He claimed the divorce hurt his career because the industry had taken Janet's side.